What if the person you trusted most, the one who raised you, protected you, loved you, was hiding a terrible secret? In a courtroom, a teenage boy is about to face the most horrifying truth of his life. His father, the man he thought he knew, might be the key to a series of disappearances that rocked their small town for years. But the truth doesn't stop there. As the boy digs deeper, he uncovers a network of darkness, where his father is just the beginning. Now, the boy must confront the unthinkable. Could his own family be connected to the disappearances of young girls? This story will leave you breathless, twists, shocks, and secrets that no one saw coming. Will he find the answers before it's too late? Stay tuned, because what happens next is nothing short of chilling. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and prepare yourself for the truth that will change everything. The courtroom was silent. Only the faint ticking of the wall clock could be heard. Everyone sat still, eyes locked on the teenager standing in front of the witness stand. 17-year-old Caleb Walker. Brown hair. Sharp jawline. Eyes that had seen too much for someone his age. Across the room sat his father, Gregory Walker. Respected local businessman. Community leader. And now, the accused. Charged with something no one in their small Pennsylvania town wanted to believe. But the evidence had begun to paint a disturbing picture. Caleb adjusted the microphone. His hands trembled slightly. But his voice was steady. "I never thought I would be here," he said. "Speaking out, against my own father." A woman in the front row gasped softly. Gregory's lawyer shifted in his seat. The judge nodded gently, signaling Caleb to continue. "He always said family was everything. That loyalty came first. But that night, everything changed." A murmur ran through the crowd. Caleb's mother sat in the back, eyes red, holding a tissue. He glanced at her, then looked away. "I was supposed to be asleep. It was almost midnight. But I could hear voices. Whispers. Laughter. And something else. A scream. Dead silence in the room." Gregory clenched his jaw. "I crept down the stairs," Caleb said, his voice lower now. "I saw my father at the back door, with a girl. She was crying. Begging. He told her to be quiet or someone would hear." The prosecutor leaned forward, eyes wide. Gregory shook his head slightly, mouthing something. Caleb went on. "I watched him push her into the car. His hands were rough. The girl looked straight at me before the door closed. Her eyes were terrified." Gasps echoed through the gallery. A woman in the jury wiped her eyes. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "That girl," Caleb continued, "never came back." A pause. A week later, her body was found near the river. Caleb's voice cracked, just slightly. "And I stayed quiet. 4 months. Because he was my dad. Because I was scared." The defense attorney stood, objecting. "Speculation." But the judge raised his hand. "Let him speak." Caleb looked at his father now. Directly. No more hesitation. "You told me it was an accident. You made me lie to the police. You said no one would believe me anyway." Gregory's face went pale. The jury watched in stunned silence. "But I remember what she said to you. You promised I would be safe. You said no one would ever find out." Gregory stood up suddenly. "That is not true," he shouted. His voice echoed off the courtroom walls. The judge banged his gavel. "Order." But Caleb did not flinch. "You always said secrets keep a family strong. But this secret destroyed everything." A hush fell again. Then Caleb reached into his pocket, pulled out a small recording device, held it up. I recorded the conversation we had that night. Gasps. Even the bailiff blinked in surprise. Gregory froze. His mouth opened, but no words came out. I kept it hidden. In my locker at school. I did not want to believe it myself. But when I heard it again last week, I knew the truth had to come out. The prosecutor slowly stood. Your Honor, she said, voice steady. We would like to enter this recording into evidence. Gregory turned pale as a ghost. The entire courtroom leaned forward. He stumbled back into his chair. Eyes wide. Lips trembling. And then Caleb pressed play. The courtroom speakers crackled. Gregory's voice filled the air. Angry. Pleading. You said you would not tell anyone, it boomed from the device. You think anyone will believe a scared little girl like you? The courtroom erupted. Some stood in shock. Others covered their mouths. The judge slammed the gavel again. Gregory buried his face in his hands. Caleb did not look away. He had carried this secret for far too long. And now everyone knew. Caleb stared at the folder. His throat tightened. Every image. Every name. A different girl. Different eyes. But the same fear. The same silence. He felt the weight of it all pressing against his chest. Detective Hayes watched him carefully. We suspect this goes back years, she said softly. Long before the night you saw him at the door. Caleb nodded slowly. He remembered the long business trips. The late nights. The locked garage. So many small things that had never made sense, until now. Why are you showing me this? He asked. Hayes hesitated. Then lowered her voice. Because he left something behind. Caleb's eyes narrowed. What? A storage unit. Out by the state line. We found it yesterday. And? Her jaw clenched. We found clothing. Personal items. Things that belonged to missing girls. Caleb felt his stomach twist. But that's not all. There were journals. His breath caught. She opened her coat and handed him a sealed envelope. This one was addressed to you. He looked at the handwriting. His father's. The same blocky letters that once wrote notes in his lunchbox. Now scrawled across a manila envelope that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Caleb opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper. Folded carefully. He unfolded it. His father's voice echoed in his mind as he read. Caleb. I never wanted you to know. Not because I was trying to protect you. But because I was afraid of what you would do when you did. You were always smart. Too smart. I knew you would figure it out someday. The things I did, the things I became, they are mine to carry. But you, son. You were never supposed to be part of it. If you are reading this, then everything has come apart. And now, maybe you are wondering how much of me is in you. I wonder that too. The last line hit him like a punch to the gut. His knees went weak. He sat down on the courthouse steps, the paper fluttering in his hand. Detective Hayes crouched beside him. You do not have to read the rest right now. But he did. You have my blood, Caleb. But you do not have my darkness. You saw the truth. You stood up. You did what I never could. A tear slid down Caleb's cheek. Not for his father. But for the part of him that had died in that courtroom. The boy who used to believe his dad was a good man. Gone. Hayes placed a hand on his shoulder. We are still processing the unit. There is more. A lot more. He looked up at her. Eyes steady. What do you need from me? She nodded slowly. Come with me. We need your help identifying some of the girls. He swallowed hard. Then stood. He felt hollow. But stronger than before. Because now the shadows had names. Faces. Stories. And someone had to tell them. Even if it broke him in the process. He followed her to the car. Wind cold on his skin. Envelope clutched in one hand. The past was not done with him. But neither was the truth. And Caleb was not running anymore. The drive was silent. No music. No small talk. Just the hum of the engine and the distant sound of wind against the windows. Caleb stared out at the Pennsylvania landscape. Bare trees. Gray skies. Everything looked cold. Still. Detective Hayes glanced at him, then back to the road. You do not have to do this today, she said quietly. Caleb shook his head. I need to. 20 minutes later, they pulled into a gated storage facility. Rows of metal units stretched like tombstones. Unit 117 was cordoned off with yellow tape. 2 officers stood nearby. One held a clipboard. Hayes led him forward. Just take your time, she said. Inside, the unit was dimly lit. Dust hung in the air. Boxes were stacked against the walls. Some labeled. Some not. In the center was a long table. Laid out were small items. Trinkets. Photographs. Torn pieces of fabric. Hair clips. Shoelaces. A cracked phone case with a butterfly sticker. Caleb's hands curled into fists. Each object screamed with silence. Hayes stepped closer. These were taken from different missing persons cases, she said. We matched a few already. But there are several we cannot identify. Caleb stepped forward. His eyes scanned the table. He recognized one of the photos instantly. His hand hovered above it. That's Jenna Marlowe, he said. She used to babysit me. Hayes nodded and made a note. She disappeared when you were 11. Caleb's throat went dry. He remembered her laugh. The way she used to braid his sister's hair. Another piece of the puzzle slid into place. A terrible, awful place. He moved down the table. Stopped. Stared. A bracelet. Worn. Cheap plastic bead spelling out the word, hope. His fingers touched it gently. I gave this to Rachel, he whispered. Hayes looked up. Rachel who? Rachel Collins. She was in my 6th grade class. She disappeared after summer break. Hayes wrote it down. They were both quiet for a long time. Caleb stepped back. There are more, aren't there? Hayes nodded. We think your father traveled between states. He kept trophies. Sometimes, journals. Caleb turned toward the boxes. What's in those? Hayes hesitated. Then motioned to an officer. He opened the nearest box. Inside were notebooks. Worn leather covers. Some stained. Some cracked with age. Hayes pulled one out carefully. We've only started reading through them. She opened it. The handwriting was familiar. Too familiar. Caleb's stomach turned as she read a line aloud. She cried when I told her she reminded me of my son's classmate. Her fear made it worse. But I couldn't stop. Caleb staggered back. The room spun for a moment. He braced himself against the doorframe. Hayes closed the notebook gently. This is why I brought you here. He left a trail. A deliberate one. He wanted someone to find it all. Caleb looked at her, stunned. Why? She sighed. Some predators like to be caught. Eventually. But others, they want their legacy to be known. Caleb shook his head. No. This isn't a legacy. It's a graveyard. Hayes studied him for a moment. You are braver than most adults I know. But this is only the beginning. There are still more boxes. More victims. We need your help connecting the dots. He nodded slowly. His face pale, but determined. I'll help. I'll read every journal if I have to. I'll do whatever it takes. Hayes met his eyes. We think he had accomplices. The words hit like ice water. Caleb froze. What? She nodded grimly. There are references in the journals. Names. Initials. Descriptions. We do not think he worked alone. Caleb stared at her. The walls felt like they were closing in again. And somewhere deep inside, he knew. The nightmare was far from over. Caleb's voice was barely a whisper. Accomplices. Detective Hayes nodded. He mentions meetings. Payments. Exchanges. Sometimes he refers to them as clients. Other times. Watchers. Caleb felt a chill creep down his spine. I thought this was just about him. Hayes looked down. It was never just about him. She walked over to a second box, opened it, and carefully pulled out a photo. It was grainy. Taken from a distance. But Caleb recognized the face instantly. His blood ran cold. It was Mr. Kessler. His old gym teacher. The one who always gave Caleb a strange feeling. Always too friendly. Always too curious. Hayes watched his reaction. You know him. Caleb nodded slowly. He used to give kids rides home after practice. No one ever questioned it. Hayes sighed. We brought him in this morning for questioning. He denied everything, but the timeline matches up. We found one of the missing girls' names in his day planner. Caleb looked away. He felt sick. How deep does this go? Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Then she answered. We do not know yet. But your father kept records. Detailed ones. He logged every location. Every name. Every time. Caleb's hands clenched. Tears threatened to rise, but he forced them back. Then we exposed them all. Every last one. Hayes nodded. But her face held something darker. Something she had not said yet. There's something else, she said finally. She walked to the far corner of the unit. Opened a locked drawer in a steel cabinet. Inside was a small wooden box. She lifted it carefully. Placed it on the table. Caleb stared at it. What's in there? Hayes hesitated. Then opened the lid. Inside were photographs. Dozens. Some recent. Some old and faded. Each with a number written on the back. And beneath the photos, a list. Typed. Categorized. With initials and payment amounts. Caleb stared at the list. At the sickening line repeated at the top of every column. Confirmed transaction. He recoiled. No. Hayes shut the box. We think your father was part of something larger. Something organized. Caleb stumbled back a step. His pulse pounding in his ears. His father was not just a monster. He was a supplier. A link in a network. Hayes placed a hand on his shoulder. Caleb, listen to me. You helped bring one of them down. But if we follow this trail, we might be able to find the rest. Caleb nodded slowly. But his heart felt like it was breaking all over again. He looked around the storage unit. The shelves. The boxes. The shadows. This was no longer just about his father. This was a map of something far more terrifying. And he was standing at the edge of it. "I'll help you," he said. "But I want to be there when the next one falls." Hayes nodded solemnly. "Then get some rest. We start tomorrow." Caleb stepped out of the unit. The cold wind hit his face like a slap. But he welcomed it. Because now he had a mission. And he was no longer afraid of the truth. He was going to drag it, screaming, into the light. That night, Caleb barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw their faces. Jenna. Rachel. The others, girls he never knew, yet now felt responsible for. Their silent stares haunted the dark corners of his room. The next morning, he arrived at the station early. Detective Hayes was already there, sipping bitter coffee, eyes glued to a monitor. She looked up as he walked in. "You ready for this?" she asked. Caleb gave a slight nod. "I have to be." She motioned for him to sit beside her. On the screen were scanned pages from his father's journals. Highlighted lines. Names. Codes. "Some of this is still being decrypted," she explained. "But here, look at this." She pointed to a line typed in all caps. "Location 4B, confirm, B. Henderson, drop in greenhouse." Caleb's heart sank. Benjamin Henderson. Hayes turned to him sharply. "You know him." "He's my neighbor. He helped my dad with yard work. They watched football together. He's known me since I was a kid." Hayes sat back slowly, as if everything was falling into place. "We need a warrant. We need to move fast." As the request was submitted, Caleb felt nausea rise. Every time he thought the worst was over, another name surfaced. Another face from his past twisted into something unrecognizable. An hour later, the SWAT team surrounded the Henderson property. Caleb stayed in the van. Watching. Waiting. Then. The front door burst open. Officers poured in. Moments later, Benjamin Henderson was dragged out in cuffs. Shouting. Red-faced. "You think you know something? I never touched those girls." But his voice cracked. And his eyes, they were guilty. Hayes turned to Caleb. "Good work." But Caleb did not feel anything. No triumph. No relief. Just a deeper kind of silence. One that sank into his bones. Later, back at the station, they opened a file found inside Henderson's house. Inside were Polaroids. Dozens. The same numbers written on the back. Same girls. Different angles. Different dates. Caleb looked away. He could not breathe. Hayes placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to see this." But he shook his head. "I do." Because if he did not, who would? The more they uncovered, the more it spread. Other names. Other towns. Other fathers. And every time Caleb recognized a name, it was like a knife to the chest. His world, his childhood, was collapsing. He was not just digging into his father's past anymore. He was tearing down the whole rotten structure. One brick at a time. One name at a time. But then. Hayes called him into her office late that night. Her face was pale. She had something in her hand. A photograph. Caleb took it. And felt the world stop. It was his sister. A photo taken years ago. She was young, barely 10. Standing in a room he had never seen. Her eyes wide. Afraid. A shadow behind her. Unclear. Faint. But the outline. It was unmistakable. Hayes watched his reaction closely. "Caleb, we need to talk about your sister." His legs gave out. He fell into the chair, gripping the photo so tightly it bent. "No." Hayes leaned forward. "There's a chance she's still alive." Caleb's heart pounded. "What?" "We found recent entries in the last journal. Mentions of a final location. A place your father called the Quiet Farm. And the last entry was dated just 3 weeks before his arrest." Caleb stared at her, unable to speak. His sister. Missing for years. Presumed dead. But now. There was hope. And it was the most terrifying thing of all. Caleb clutched the photograph, his fingers trembling. The image of his sister, so small, so scared, burned into his vision. Detective Hayes stood slowly. "We tracked a property in Vermont," she said softly. "An abandoned farmhouse in his name, purchased under a shell company 5 years ago. No utilities. No neighbors for miles." She paused. "We are going there tomorrow." Caleb rose to his feet. "I'm coming with you." Hayes opened her mouth to protest, then stopped. She saw it in his eyes. He was not a boy anymore. He was the only one who could walk this path to the end. The next morning, frost coated the fields as they drove into the Vermont hills. The farmhouse emerged from the woods like a secret. Weathered. Sun-bleached. Windows boarded. Roof sagging. But there were tire tracks in the dirt. Fresh. The team approached in silence. Hayes held up her hand. 2 officers circled the back. Caleb followed behind her, heart thundering with every step. At the front door, Hayes glanced at him. "You sure?" He nodded once. She kicked it open. The air inside was stale. Rotten wood. Mold. Dust. But beneath it, something else. Perfume. Very faint. Very old. They swept through the first floor, nothing. Then came the basement door. Locked. Hayes smashed it with a crowbar. The stairs creaked as they descended into darkness. A single hanging bulb buzzed overhead. And then they saw it. A makeshift room. Padded walls. Chains. But empty. And in the corner, drawings. Crayons. Torn notebooks. Childlike scrawls. Names. Stars. A girl's handwriting. Caleb stepped forward, barely breathing. One page said it clearly. "My name is Emily. I am not dead." His vision blurred. He dropped to his knees, clutching the page to his chest. Hayes touched his shoulder. "She was here. And recently." They searched the rest of the property. In the attic, more clues. Food wrappers. A mattress. A doll with a cracked face. "She was alive," Caleb whispered. "Maybe still is." A sound behind them. Snapping twigs. The officers ran to the treeline. But no one was there. Only footprints. Leading away. Small ones. Fresh. "She ran," Hayes said. "She heard us coming." Caleb's eyes locked on the woods. "She's still out there." He turned to Hayes. "We keep looking." Hayes nodded. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Caleb allowed himself to hope. Because this story, this nightmare, was no longer just about what was lost. It was about what could still be found. And he would not stop. Not until Emily was home. Not until every shadow was chased away by light. The courtroom. The storage unit. The House of Horrors. All of it had led to this. A brother. A trail. And the unbreakable bond that even monsters could not destroy. The truth had shattered everything. But it also opened the door. To something stronger. Something worth fighting for. Hope. And justice. At last. The story ends, where it should. With a boy no longer afraid. And a sister waiting to be found.